As part of our vision and outcomes course, I'd just like to run through a really great example of target operating models, blueprints, and all that stuff that we came across a couple of years ago called the Green Deal. Now, the Green Deal was a UK government initiative to completely change and transform the way our energy market worked, driven by a number of factors. So, the overwhelming desire was to improve the carbon footprint of private properties in the UK. Originally, the department was called DEC, but later became BAYS. Now, the idea here was that you would completely shake up the energy market, challenge existing ways of working to achieve some of these carbon benefits. However, when you stand back and look at how complex it was almost a terrifying kind of blueprint that was needed. So, what were we trying to do? Well, traditionally, the approach was to hand out money to people to keep their houses in good shape. So, over a number of years, you could have your roof replaced, your boiler replaced, insulation, all that kind of stuff. So, one of the first things that was going to be a challenge was the attitude of homeowners to this scenario, because they were used to being given money when they bought a dodgy house or a dilapidated house. Now they were going to have a different way of funding, because what they were going to need was they were going to be given a loan. So the idea was you were lent money to improve the insulation or the energy efficiency of your home, and that actually the savings that you would make on energy consumption would pay back the loan. So instead of being given money, you actually benefited from the savings that you gained from the loan. So in effect, homeowners would still get their houses upgraded at very low cost, and in fact cost neutral was the aim. But you can see here we're starting to see the big change issues coming in. So not only were we having this restructure the way a market operated, we had to change attitudes to get this government policy to work. It also needed a creation of an entirely new marketplace, because within that marketplace, things that didn't exist needed to now exist. For example, a bank was needed to provide the funding. So somehow the money had to be gained to be lent out. Now, traditionally, the government would find the money and grants, and the money would be gone. Now, what it was going to try and do was try to attract public sector finance into the picture and turn that into a bank so that it could be lent out to people. So this is a completely new idea. Supply chains were traditionally difficult in this sector because grants would come and go. So money came and went. So organisations would only be in it for a year or two and they'd be gone again. We needed a more reliable supply chain in the UK to make this work. A framework for managing and measuring the market effectiveness. How efficient were the loans going out? How efficient was the carbon footprint reduction as a result of all this? A layer of management that had never been needed in the UK before. Methods for promoting and selling loans. Householders never had to go and get money for this sort of stuff. Where were they going to go and get it? Where was the marketplace for it? Would they be bothered? Would it be worthwhile for them? A whole new behaviour was needed and methods to not only supply the money but promote them and encourage people to take them up. And also supporting existing energy industries. So if there were new entrants to the market, how did the old entrants survive? Did they evolve? Did they change? How was this going to work? So the areas that they needed to consider, or they need a lot more than this. There's a couple of things that we want to talk about in this little video include the role of the target operating model, how the supply chain structure could work, an accreditation model that they would need to be able to ensure that they weren't using fly-by-night builders and plumbers and all that kind of stuff, which had been a problem in the past, and then how the transactions would flow around, because they were basically creating a huge market for this to happen in. So first of all, let's think about the target operating model. Now, within this course, we've talked about the target operating model, and then within the target operating model, there would be a number of blueprints that operate. So when we look at this, we are looking at something vast. So what do we see? Our target operating model sets, so we have a vision and strategy, and there were four distinct areas. The governance model for managing the market, the process delivery model for how things would happen within that market, and then the asset model, how all the money and the facilities would work together. And then the areas that needed to think about was governance of that marketplace, how was risk going to be dealt with, how was control going to be done to make sure that the market operated effectively and that there was compliance, because we were looking at billions of pounds worth of investment in this. So a really radical program. So when we're looking at the governance model about what sort of regulatory bodies, what capabilities and behaviours would be needed, then we looked at the asset, how every person's house was an asset in effect in different locations. They needed a whole range of facilities, different types of insulation would be needed in different scenarios. How was tax and structure going to work? And then the process model. How was this going to be supported? What were the portals and the technology that were going to needed to apply for loans, to pay them back? How was all that going to work? So you can see when they sat down and thought about their target operating model, it was potentially huge. But this is a great example of the target operating model view of the world at a high level, interrelationships. But we're going to see other ones in a minute. So looking at the environment that they were operating in, you can see when you break this down, we had to look at the Green Deal participants. We needed people who could measure buildings. We needed the people who owned buildings, the homeowners, the landlords, all the people with commercial sites. They were the participants. They were the ones who were going to need to be involved. Then there's another box, all the delivery partners. There were people who are going to have to deliver the plumbing and the roofs and whatever, and all the insulation, all that kind of stuff. There was a partnership that was being needed. But interestingly, one, the accreditation certification bodies, who was going to give people permission to give out the loans, making sure they have the right credentials for that sort of stuff. Who were going to be the people that accredited the tradesmen to actually do quotes, the people to do evaluations at the time of your energy efficiency? There was a huge complexity to be dealt with. And then we move across, we're thinking about the Green Deal services there. You know, there's the money processing, there's the facilities, there's the repairs, all that kind of stuff that needed to go in there. And then potentially on the right hand side, what about all these systems, the reporting databases, the authorized certification bodies, the assessors, the installers, the companies that could provide installers? There was a never ending list of people that needed to be involved in this environment, and they needed to be built into the blueprint that the government was designing. So let's just look at one area. So what we can see here is the start of a blueprint for Green Deal accreditation, and it's the O part of the blueprint. So we know that in a blueprint, we have a process, we have an organization, we have tools, and we have information. What we were looking at in this one is we can see the O, the organizational structure that was needed around accreditation. So we needed UCAS, the UK accreditation body. They needed to have some way of accrediting assessors who would then accredit the organisations who could deliver this. So you've got the Green Deal assessment bodies, the certification bodies coming together. You had people who could provide licenses. So the UCAS people could set the standards and they could check that you were compliant to those standards. But who were going to order and issue the licenses? How were they going to be funded? And how were they going to be checked that people were maintaining those standards? The sort of ISO 9001 type of thing, ISO 14001 type of thing. All right, so you can see an organisational structure and some bodies creeping in like Ofgem and OFT about these people who would look after the code of practice. But what we're looking at is one piece of the target operating model. And you can see how this is a blueprint. Now, each one of those would have processes, tools that supported them. and management information to report on their progress. And then a further look about how does the whole thing and the idea of soft systems mapping. Now, one of the things that we've tried to encourage you to do on this course is to look at the system that works best for you. What works well? So we've got this one here, the soft systems mapping. And what these guys did was a great job of showing how, in a very kind of graphical way, how everything fitted together. So as you can see, everything radiated from the consumer in the middle. And over on the right hand side, we've got the energy supplier. Yep, they're providing you energy bills and payments. We've then got the GD assessor at the top who comes and looks at your house or home and says how energy efficient it is and works out how much could be saved by upgrading the way your carbon footprint efficiency is. And then there's a whole load of things that go back around them. And then we've got systems administrators dealing with the homeowner, giving them advice, that kind of stuff. And then we've got the GD providers at the bottom. Yeah, the Green Deal plan. We've got the people who provide the money, who can provide you with the installers and manage the whole thing for you. So you can see how they all interact in this wonderful swirl of lines. Now, trust me, that's only at the highest level how that's fitting together, but it gives you an idea about when you actually get into this and track how things work, you can get this picture of what's going to happen. Now, from a program perspective, they could say, well, what fits at the moment? What needs to change? Where do we need to make the interventions? Massively complex program. And it's still there with, I'm recording this in 2021. This was largely formulated back in 2011, 2012, and it's out there and it's working. So you can see it was a long, complex program, but it has delivered benefits and it's been a success. Maybe not in it was a lot easier to take a grant from government, just go and get yourself some insulation. However, a big long-term strategic program that's delivered value. Well, I hope that's given you a chance to reflect, think about how blueprints, target operating models might work for your program, give you some ideas to go back to the workplace with, and think about how you can make things better in your world.